Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking into the best Houston sports podcast. Robert along with Sports Radio 610 Shaun Bijani. And if you're new to the show, welcome to the party. 45 years in journalism between the two of us, over 35 covering sports in the H. And Shaun, the Rockets' future might have gotten way better this weekend, and we'll get there in just a second. But as we record Monday evening, my heart is hurting for earthquake victims in the Middle East. And Shaun, the Turkish people are close to our hearts because of Alperen Şengün, maybe the best Turkish player ever. It has become a thing here with the Rockets, and I know we've got a lot of Turkish viewers because of it.
Yeah, incredible story that's continuing to develop in Turkey. Obviously, we're following it really, really closely. The death toll, just continues to rise after the earthquake. And Şengün, I don't know if you saw his tweet earlier, but just describing the immense amount of pain that he's feeling as a citizen of Turkey. It's really tough stuff to read, tough stuff to watch and follow, and obviously all the best to everybody affected by it.
Yeah, in Turkey, it's also close to my heart because my mom, who passed away 3 years ago, she housed over 200 exchange students over the last 25 years of her life, and several were Turkish. Her student, Sefer, referred to her as his American mama. Her student, Hatice, has told me that my mom was her best friend, and she dedicated her PhD thesis to her just recently. I'm close friends with her. We communicate regularly. She's actually from Malatya, which is, many people have seen. There are buildings crumbling in scenes that look like 9/11 in Malatya, as well as around Turkey and Syria as well. And thankfully, she was in Ankara, and her family in Malatya is safe. They evacuated their home. They're staying with relatives. There's no electricity. It's snowing. It's not a good situation. We've dealt with the no electricity and snowing here in Houston, but this is a whole other thing. This is like 9/11 combined with our freeze here in Houston. And the last count I saw for Turkey, Shaun, is at least 2,300 people were killed, 13,000 injured, 6,200 buildings collapsed, 8,000 people rescued from the rubble. To give people some idea, Turkey is slightly bigger in area, Shaun, than Texas, but with nearly 3 times as many people. So there's a connection there between Turkey and Texas, I think.
Yeah, and those numbers are staggering. And you get a mental picture in your mind of the devastation and everything that people are going through and having to deal with that. And, earthquakes is one of those things. What do you do? There's not much you can do about it. And I know we can say, similar things to a lot of natural disasters, and it's so true, but it's just, that makes it that much more difficult to deal with.
Yeah, the scenes there just devastating. And so we send much love to our Turkish friends. And I want to get to maybe a deal that might affect Şengün here with the Rockets in just a second. But just a quick reminder that we're approaching 1,000 subscribers. We're almost there. So the best way to support us is subscribe and comment on YouTube. You can listen on the run by subscribing on your favorite podcast app as well. And Shaun, this Kyrie Irving trade is a massive deal, as Rockets fans know, because this ups the value of those Nets draft picks. And I've said it a couple of times on here, but I'll say it with even more conviction right now. The Rockets must package those Nets picks this summer at the latest, because the value is at its peak, and first round picks lose value faster than a new car getting off a car lot, man.
Yeah, and the tough part about this is, for me, I know what you're saying, and it could be an extremely big deal for the Rockets. But Brooklyn's still, they're in the 4 seed. I know they were in the 2 seed, before Durant's injury. I think he's scheduled to come back pretty soon. And I still think there's so much up in the air with where Brooklyn is at as an organization and whether or not they can make things right with Kevin Durant. We felt the same way, when Harden left Brooklyn and went to Philadelphia. You felt better about those picks. And now that Kyrie has continued to make waves and did so just over the weekend, in a flash, he was dealt to Dallas. Now it looks even better. If Durant forces his way out, he just signed a 4-year contract extension. I don't know how that's going to work. And if Brooklyn, it's going to be very interesting to see over the course of the next just few days with the NBA trade deadline coming up on Thursday, if they decide to try and get better quickly, or if they just kind of ride this thing out with Kevin Durant and try to sell him on the fact that, you know what, you're still a superstar. You were playing at an MVP caliber level. And let's see if we can get you some good quality help in the offseason. I don't know. I'm not ready to say, hey, this is a great, great deal for the Houston Rockets in terms of those future picks, because I'm not certain that it's going to look just the way you think it is yet.
Well, the problem with Kevin Durant and what you're saying right there is he just demanded a trade a few months ago.
Well,
and that was with Kyrie on the roster. Now Kyrie is gone. I don't think, have the capital to go out and get another superstar. And Shaun, you can go through the last 40 years and you find me a team that's won a championship, and you know this guy's going to want to compete for a championship. You find me a team that can do it with just one superstar. They've lost a lot of draft capital with that trade to the Rockets. So I don't know where you go from here if you're the Nets and Kevin Durant. It's going to be interesting.
I know, and it's been a while since we've seen a team that has reached that promised land, right, and won an NBA title with, one superstar. I can't even really think. I mean, maybe it was the Mavericks, right, with Dirk Nowitzki, or did he have help? Was there somebody else that you would deem a superstar on that team? I think that was probably it. Was that like 2011 or something like that when the Mavs last won?
Yeah.
Going back, I got the year right. And I knew it wasn't that long ago, but I mean, it's been a little bit, more than a decade. So your point stands. It's a great point. I don't know that they necessarily have to do that, though. I mean, they've got a little bit of draft cap. I mean, look at this deal. The fact that you can trade, first round picks or just draft picks in general, like 6-7 years down the road. I mean, who's to say what kind of deal Brooklyn can put together between now and Thursday, or even in the offseason, to try and sell Kevin Durant on, hey, give it more time in Brooklyn. We're going to get this deal right. At the end of the day, really, the exodus of Harden, the exodus of now Kyrie Irving is fixing a massive mistake that a lot of people saw coming just a few short years ago when Brooklyn put this super team together, that those three combined didn't even play 75 games together in the NBA. I don't think Kyrie and Durant ended up playing, maybe 15 games together, it seemed like, or something. And it just never came together. If Brooklyn can find a way to say, hey, this is the deal. You're still Kevin Durant. You're a superstar. You're an MVP caliber player. Let's see what we can do. That's why I'm not ready to flush them down the commode just yet and say they're done and the Rockets picks look that much better.
I hear a lot of noise from fans dreaming of trading these picks back to Brooklyn for Kevin Durant, which, is an interesting thought, but it's the assumption that James Harden's coming back here. And I'll say Katie might not be too anxious to get into the James Harden business anymore. And we also have no idea if Harden won't like his situation better in Philadelphia, depending on what happens in the playoffs this year. Plus, I'm not sure, Shaun, Kevin Durant should trust the Rockets' current management in their ability to build a winning team with the right veterans. But maybe you throw it all out the window if they luck out at land Wemby.
Yeah, maybe I'm being a little bit too positive here in this light. I have no reason to be this positive in regards of the Rockets, and specifically Tillman Fertitta, who seems to be all in with Rafael Stone. But I have to believe, as disastrous as this rebuild has been, I mean, there's not very many rebuilds that are enlightening and eye-opening and positive. I mean, it's a terrible thing for an organization to have to go through. But the Rockets, the way that they've done it, it hasn't gone well. There's been a lot of noise. There's been a lot of dysfunction. I have to believe that the Rockets are going to, if they want to take the next step, move on from Rafael Stone. And if they do that, then I think you need to anticipate an entirely different type of culture change. And that does not involve bringing a former Rocket by the name of James Harden back into the fold. I don't think the guy's a winning basketball player right now. I think he could have made an argument that he could have been, 5-6 years ago at his peak. maybe in 2017,
Well,
2018.
well, you don't say he's a winning basketball player, but he's the number 2 guy right now. He's the second best player on a team that is the second. Last I checked, they were the number 2 in the Eastern Conference, and he is leading the NBA in assist.
That's fine. He's always been really good at accumulating personal, and individual stats and accolades like that. Brooklyn's number 4 right now. Philadelphia is number 3. The number 2 is Milwaukee, and Boston is number 1 in the Eastern Conference. That's as it stands right now. When I say he's not a winning player, can you win a championship with James Harden on your roster? Look, this guy's got an excellent opportunity to do so within the Eastern Conference at Philadelphia this season. Boston stands in their way. Milwaukee stands in their way. And you know what? James Harden stands in his own way. Similarly to Kyrie Irving, who was talking about contract within a season, and at the time that Brooklyn is trying to contend within the Eastern Conference against Boston, making more waves. Now he's out of town and he's in Dallas. He can talk that noise to Mark Cuban and the Dallas Mavericks. James Harden is just a few short weeks removed from making headlines, whether it was his league, a Philly league, an effort to try and, get Harden to sign an extension, whatever the case it might have been. You have a guy talking about individual stuff mired in a season in which you have a legitimate opportunity to compete and you're trying to form the very best possible relationship with your head coach, with your other star player, Joel Embiid, and he's making it about himself. So that's what I mean when I say I don't think he's a winning player. And I don't want that type of culture, that type of attitude, that type of mentality back here in the city of Houston when you've, built one of the more skillful and, intriguing rosters right now that is really missing some good veteran pieces and good coaching to take him to the next level.
Yeah, you're not going to get much argument with me on Harden. I'm just throwing it out there as devil's advocate. And I know there are people out there.
People need to shoot that one like dead, like bury that thing. Don't even think about it. Like get over it. It was a great time in Rocket history. It was a lot of fun that, unfortunately didn't amount to squat, that you can hang up in the banners or that you could put in a trophy case. And that's it. It was a great time. It was fun, but it wasn't what everybody wanted. And it's certainly not going to be the case now as he comes back, 4 or 5 years older.
Yeah, but it's if you can get Kevin Durant with Harden.
Why does it have to be both? How much does Durant really want to play with James Harden at this point in his career, being is that it didn't work in Brooklyn? Granted, they had knucklehead Kyrie there.
Oh, you just basically said what I was saying. I don't know if he really wants to get in that business. I'm just saying if James Harden will come back here and Kevin Durant will come in that package, and all of a sudden you are an intriguing team. And like I said, it gets way, 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 way more interesting if Wembanyama, lands at number 1 with the Rockets. I mean, that's, you put those 3 guys together all of a sudden, and you're talking about guys like Jalen Green and Şengün and Jabari as maybe your, third, fourth, or fourth, fifth, sixth best player. One of those guys will probably be out the door in a trade for Kevin Durant. But yeah. I would still say 2 of those guys with those three people I just mentioned is a pretty good little roster to have there.
I wouldn't mind. I guess I really wouldn't mind Kevin Durant here. We know he's a championship player. He's an MVP caliber player still. Whether or not he's able to stay healthy, I mean, who knows? And I don't necessarily agree with a lot of the things that he says. I don't particularly like how he too tends to make things about himself, but he's a superstar player. And if you can get that massive buy-in, you put him here, and I'm not saying bring Harden along. If you could get just Durant, I'd be all about it. I don't know really who wouldn't. You couple him with his knowledge and his just drive to win with this young roster, with Jabari Smith, with Jalen Green. I mean, my gosh, whoever you have left over, I mean, certainly would be those 2 guaranteed. Don't know what you would have to give up to acquire him, but I mean, yes, I would be all about that. That makes you better immediately. But who's the head coach? And, from your scenario, that sounds like a lot of basketball to have to move around. And there's only one of them on the court. And you need a really great coach. I don't know who that would be. It certainly wasn't Steve Nash. And it certainly wasn't Jacques Vaughn to make that happen in Brooklyn. So I don't know who the Houston Rockets could get, who they have on their radar that would be able to get that kind of a buy-in and build a great culture so quickly that it immediately becomes a championship level squad with Kevin Durant on it.
Yeah, you need a coach anyway. Let's just be clear about
You
that. There's going to be a new coach. They got to get that right. We just saw what the Texans did with DeMeco. You know what the deal is there. But crazy scenario, Shaun. The Nets are 5 games from the 7th seed. If they end up in a play-in situation and don't make the playoffs, there is a 1% chance that they get the first or second pick in the lottery. And in that scenario, the Rockets have swap rights. Shaun, it's an insane scenario. Probably not going to happen, but you're telling me there's a chance?
There's always a chance, I guess, until there's not, right? I mean, mathematically, we can hope and pray to keep that one alive. I mean, it's certainly, you feel a lot less better about that one than you did at one point in time, the Houston Texans being guaranteed to have that number 1 overall pick. And we all saw how that turned out. I guess, we've talked ourselves in, well, number 2 is not so bad after all, especially when you get, one of the top head coaching candidates to sign with the organization like DeMeco Ryans. But I mean, the Knicks, Atlanta, Chicago, Washington, that's your 7, 8, 9, 10 right now. I mean, those are the only teams that, presumably, if you want to frame it this way, would have to overtake, a Miami, Cleveland, and or Brooklyn for that's 4, 5, 6 in the Eastern Conference. And I don't really see that happening.
It's a matter of the Nets dropping. And
but if you drop, you're going to be replaced. And who are you going to be replaced by? Is it going to be the Knicks? Is it going to be the Hawks? Who's it going to be?
Yeah, well, they just have to drop to 7. You don't care who it is. It's just like, if they start playing bad without Kyrie, and of course, right now Durant not playing, and you don't know if he can stay healthy. I mean, that's a big deal with the guy that's his age and has had his injury history.
And so, that money left.
Yeah, it's I don't know, but let's change gears to the Astros because it hasn't gone unnoticed to Astros fans or myself that former Astros beat writer for the Houston Chronicle, Evan Drellich, has a new book out called Winning Fixes Everything: How Baseball's Brightest Minds Created Sports' Biggest Mess. And Shaun, I got some personal thoughts on this that I'm going to open up with, but I don't know if you know this. Did you know that Evan had 21 appearances as a guest on Houston Sports Talk?
Oh, I did not. That's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. He was a regular when he was back with the Chronicle. And this is very personal because Evan wasn't just a guest. We met up for drinks a couple of times. I considered him a friend. And as a proud journalist myself, I have a journalism degree at the University of Missouri. I was very impressed with the stories on the Astros and his writing. It's important to understand that Evan told me back then that the Astros officials tried to get him fired. This is not some new thing that he's just making up. They went to his editor. It angered me when he told me about that. Still does as a journalist, to be honest with you. But Evan has been open about all that. And I'll circle, just back to that point in a second. But this book, Shaun, it's more than the Astros and details of some of the other cheating. However, he's promoted the Astros facets on his social media. And it seems no accident that when it comes out right after the Astros championship, that's a little bit of a, what? It's right after the Astros champion. That's a little bit too on the nose. And Shaun, let me be open, a little bit to what happened on our show after the Astros cheating scandal. Because I contacted Evan. I asked him to come on the show, of course. There was an excuse that he couldn't come on the show. I figured he was busy. He's going to circle back to me. He never did. I messaged him about the cheating from the other teams because I started to get angry like the rest of us that this was a witch hunt for the Astros. Evan messaged me back that the Astros crimes were more egregious in so many words. And it's at that point where I started to lose it with Evan, and I felt like he lost credibility and maybe let his personal feelings intrude on the truth. And Shaun, as I've said before, and I'll repeat now, when I get stopped for a speeding ticket in court, do I get to say, but yeah, there were all these other people going faster than me. You can't find me because even though I broke the law, I didn't break it as badly.
that's about the oldest argument in the book, right? I mean, when you get pulled over on the freeway for speeding and your excuse is, hey, I was just keeping up with the flow of traffic, that one officer can only pull one guy over,
Yeah.
especially on a freeway.
And also, just let me give you a little bit something more serious. When you shoot somebody with a gun and kill him on purpose, and another guy shoots him 10 times and you shoot him 5 times, does it matter that one guy shot him 10 times and one time? You're both doing something that you shouldn't be doing, and it's against the law. And just like the Astros and the Dodgers and the Yankees and the Red Sox were all doing stuff that was against the law, it doesn't matter that the Astros were using a bigger gun.
No, but I'll take your analogy. Excuse me. I'll take your analogy to a little bit of a different, level here. You talking about shooting somebody 10 times versus once. There's a little bit something extra behind the guy that shoots 10 times versus just once and accomplishes the same thing. In regards to Evan and what you'd said about him, whether or not there was some vitriol, some malice behind his action in terms of what he was saying in the book, the timing that he's pumping his book after another Astros World Series. Look, if it's true, and you can kind of corroborate what he's saying in the book in a part of this recent excerpt that has been released in your conversation with him, that he shared with you, the Astros met with him and his editors and tried to get him fired. There has to be almost innately some ill will, some bad feelings, some angst against the Houston Astros from that point on. And you can call yourself a professional. You can be as professional as you want. It's incredibly difficult. It's very human and understandable to be able to have those and carry those feelings with you. But to have it affect your work and what you do professionally is different. You cannot let it affect your work, because he's not writing for the Houston Astros. He's not writing for the Athletic Houston. He's not writing for NBC Boston anymore. I don't know what I guess he's with the Athletic now, but whatever.
Right.
Point still stands. Okay. You just can't let it affect your work and call yourself a professional, at the same time. You're talking out of both sides of your mouth. And so I think that's the problem that a lot of people have with him. And I don't necessarily think he's done the best job of, explaining that situation. And I don't really think he's kind of cared to. I think it's become all about the book. It's easy to say, though, Robert, that, man, look at the timing of this book. It's coming out right after, 2-3 months after the Astros win their second World Series. It's called marketing. He's gone, the way of writing this book, pumping the excerpts out. He's trying to sell books. If it's $20, $30 a pop, whatever it is, it's marketing. What better time to do it? And he's not trying to appeal to Houston readers or listeners. He's trying to appeal to the rest of America that absolutely hates the Houston Astros.
Yeah, he's trying to make money, bottom line. And, It's hard to make money as a journalist, and I get all that. It's just, you do not seem like you are doing this for all the right reasons because of what happened. And, I would say, I would say nothing about this if he hadn't messaged me that this was the Astros being more egregious. And that has been the philosophy with all of these people around baseball of like the Astros were more egregious. And I guess my point is on all that, like we didn't play this game when it was the steroid scandal. Well, this team had 10 guys that did steroids and this team had 2 guys that did steroids. So, we think that the team that did 10 steroids is, 10 guys that did steroids is a lot worse than the team that did 2. We were mad at everybody. We were mad at every player that was involved. We were mad at baseball for covering it up. We were mad at the teams for, I don't think the teams took as much hit as they should have, but we were mad at the teams. But this is, you don't do this in any other thing in baseball, but we're going to do this with video cheating, that it is now more egregious because they did that. One team did it better than the other teams, or did it more, or did it, whatever.
Here's my problem with that is, where's the proof in that statement? Where's the proof in that the Astros were more egregious compared to the Yankees, compared to the Red Sox, the Dodgers? I don't think you can really compare it to anybody, because we never got, and by we, I mean the public, never got the full scope, the full scale, the whole story in regard to any other organization in Major League Baseball other than the Astros. They were the poster child of this. I don't want to call it a witch hunt, but of this investigation by Major League Baseball to get to the bottom of cheating.
One guy, Mike Fiers. That's the difference in this whole story. Is there isn't the smoking Mike Fiers, so to speak, with other teams.
Right.
I get back to the gun analogy. There isn't a smoking Mike Fiers, and that's been the difference. But yeah, you're right. We do not know what the extent of these other teams cheating, because there wasn't the investigation as much as, at least it didn't seem like it was as vociferous or as, I guess, as detailed as it was with the Astros. And the Astros were kind of stuck to the wall because of the Mike Fiers thing, and they had to come out and do it the way they did, because they were trying to, say we're cooperating. We're trying to get out of this as smoothly as we can get out of it. And that's what the situation was. But, you keep going back to the same thing that we've said as Astros fans from day one. The investigation plainly states, and I'm tired of talking about it, but I'll say it one more time. The investigation plainly states that Carlos Beltran and Alex Cora walked into the dugout from their positions with other teams, one of those teams being the New York Yankees, and said, you guys need to cheat because everybody else is cheating way harder than you. And we know that he wouldn't know that fact if it wasn't happening with the New York Yankees. And Carlos Beltran and Alex Cora, I believe, was with which team at that point before he came to the Astros?
Wasn't it Red
Yes.
Sox? Yeah.
Yes. And the Red Sox were flat out found cheating before the Astros thing even happened with the Apple Watches and what was going on with that. So, like, I'm tired of saying the same thing. The Astros fans know what I'm preaching to the choir. I mean, I feel like we're just talking to the choir, Sean, but you and I wanted to get that out there on Evan. And I personally wanted to say that about Evan because, I know everybody wants to hate Evan right now if you're an Astros fan, but look, most of what he's done is just reporting, and he's trying to get the facts correct. But I feel like the tint of the way he's reported it has been a little bit too Astros centric. And, it's not his fault that Mike Fiers was the only one that opened. I don't know if he was trying to get Yankees and Red Sox players and they just wouldn't drop something, the bomb that Fiers did. But at the same time, he did tell me specifically that he thought this was an issue with the Astros because it was more egregious and it was the culture that was going on in the Astros organization. And to me, as soon as you make that statement, you lose credibility in everything else that you do. You kind of drop everything, especially knowing, like I said, the other facts about him in the Houston Chronicle.
Yeah. And look, you said it. I mean, he didn't handle the reporting side perfectly. And I think what's going to incite even more hatred, if possible, on behalf of Houston Astro fans, is the fact that, in this recent excerpt that he'd released, that he tells the story of him going to Major League Baseball officials and saying, hey, I've got this on the Houston Astros and somebody can corroborate it. What have you heard? And Major League Baseball officials were like, well, we've heard this, that, and the other thing, but nothing like that. Now, we can't speak certain things, let's see what else, you can bring us and we'll see what else we can find out, that kind of thing. And it's Houston Astro fans are looking at that like, man, he's going to Major League Baseball officials as kind of like a tattletale, so to speak. He's doing this versus, real reporting. And, if he had that to do over again, would he do it differently? Maybe so. But I just found it really interesting in terms of the timing. When he decided to hold on to that story, and then he gets paired up in an opportunity to work with Ken Rosenthal, and then all of a sudden, things just start clicking, man. Contacts are made, conversations are had, and hey, it's a go ahead. And just hours before we're going to publish, Mike Fiers is ready to talk. And I just found that incredibly interesting as part of this piece. The one thing that I'm not sure of is, if you're just an average baseball fan, the fan of any other team, Robert, do you think reading this book we're going to get any closer to the real bottom of the cheating scandal? in reading this because I don't get that sense. I just think this is going to be a continuous and maybe just another thorn in the side of Astro fans that choose to read this book that, you know what, here's just more hate. Here's just more vitriol against the Houston Astros than anything, instead of it really being a knowledgeable kind of read and figuring anything else out in terms of Major League Baseball and maybe what they knew that we, the public, have not been made privy to yet.
Enough with the past. Let's get to the future, and let's get to the fun future with the Houston Texans. And Gary Kubiak came out on your station, Sports Radio 610. What do you have to say that struck you about him and DeMeco Ryans?
Well, you know, the first my biggest takeaway, and I thought there was a lot of little interesting nuggets in his conversation within the loop Monday morning with Landry Locker and John Lopez, was that um, in 2006, when DeMeco was drafted by the Houston Texans, I mean, that was a really, really good class by the Texans. They had a number of players that played many, many years in the NFL. You know, Gary kind of, you know, looked back on that draft class when he was explaining what sort of advice he imparted already on DeMeco upon taking the Texans job. And it's that, you know, I want to be here as a resource for you because you and that class came in and were so professional, so diligent, so hardworking that you really made it that much easier on our football team to establish the culture that we wanted in the locker room and on the football field. And so it was almost Gary's like returning the favor, so to speak, in so many words. That's not what he said, but in so many words, it was. And I found that to be really, really interesting. I mean, obviously, Gary Kubiak is a big DeMeco guy and, you know, told stories, you know, about how he and the coaching staff would sit in meeting rooms and just talk about, like, oh my God, this guy, he's going to make a great coach one day. I don't know if he's going to end up doing it, but man, if he does, the sky's the limit for this guy. And here you are, you know, just 6 years in to starting a coaching career with the San Francisco 49ers. Now you're the head coach in the NFL. Gary was obviously very proud of him for that. But I thought one of the most interesting things, Robert, that Gary had said on the football side of things was his upbringing, DeMeco's upbringing. And if you're going to go to work for a Shanahan, like Gary did in Mike Shanahan many years ago, the demand of a Shanahan to their assistant coaches is not just to do your job, but understand the job. If you're a defensive coordinator, you better know the offense like the back of your hand.
Go back to our conversation with David Anderson. You can find the clip on the YouTube channel. I put it up there specifically. And David Anderson, I asked him, what do you think a defensive guy would know about an offense? He obviously doesn't know anything about offense, according to the fans. But I mean, isn't his job to figure out offenses all the time? And isn't his job in practice to work against the offense that is Kyle Shanahan's offense? Yes. That's what he does.
Yes. I mean, look, it's nothing really groundbreaking and innovative, I wouldn't think, but it is the way in which you prepare. It is the way in which you collaborate, which was a key word, obviously, in the DeMeco press conference last week, you know, collaboration. But I think those demands, you know, by Shanahan, I mean, the Shanahan tree is what it is for a reason. It's obviously very successful, and they have a system, a way of, you know, not just in what they teach and coach their players to do, but the way in which they bring their assistants along to disseminate that information to their players, the ability to look at something, understand something, and then convey it, teach it, you know, to the players, I think is very interesting. And that's something that I would be really excited to learn more about. And I think we will, as DeMeco seems to be very forthright in terms of, you know, the expectations of coaching, the expectations of his players, obviously that he's had over the course of the last 2 years as one of the top defensive coordinators in the entire league. I'd be really excited to know a lot more about that. And I think we will learn more about that in the coming months.
Remember when Wade Phillips came to help out the Texans when they were not doing so well under Gary Kubiak, and the Texans were having a little bit of defensive issues? And I'm wondering what did you hear from his conversation? Did Gary act like he would come around to maybe be a sort of surrogate teacher with the coaching staff? Would he have a bigger role than that? Is that something that he addressed?
Yeah, I mean, he was asked, pretty informally about his participation. It was like, hey, we're anticipating seeing you more at training camps, at this upcoming training camp, whether it be in an unofficial capacity or not. You're here to be a resource for DeMeco, right? And said, absolutely, quote, absolutely. And look, I think this has potential to go a little bit deeper, Robert, because, both of his sons, Clay and Clint, are in the NFL now as coaches, one with Denver this past season, one with Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco. And, look, they're young, they're starting their coaching careers, but, there is strong potential because, look, where there's smoke, there's fire, and timing is everything. But if, in fact, one of Gary's sons, maybe becomes a passing game coordinator or an offensive analyst for the Houston Texans and tries to work his way up here under DeMeco Ryans. Maybe it's along with Bobby Slowick. Maybe it's, along with somebody else in that Shanahan tree. I don't know. But look, Gary's, I don't think ever really come out and said it. He doesn't want to roam the sidelines anymore. He doesn't want to coach, and I think he worries a little bit more about his health nowadays than maybe he used to even 5-6 years ago, certainly 10 years ago. But when one of your sons is working as maybe a confidant, as an advisor, or something along the lines in that capacity, he's obviously a great mind. The Kubiak Shanahan tree is certainly well proven, very successful over the years in the NFL. I would not be surprised if he becomes increasingly involved as the years go by with DeMeco Ryans.
And we kind of go back to what we were talking about in our last show in the DeMeco Ryans press conference, post-game sort of presser and a post-game thoughts. And these guys that the Texans have over the years that were really good resources because of DeMeco Ryans back in the fold. You might have J.J. Watt come by to help you out. Andre Johnson. I don't know if Arian Foster, I feel like, is always angry at somebody. So I don't know if you get an Arian Foster to come back and help you. But all of the guys that DeMeco played with that we respected will be back here in a heartbeat if DeMeco needs them. You get that feeling. David Anderson, we just talked to the other day. I mean, I'd imagine he wouldn't mind coming back and helping out however he can. But the guys that you really want helping out, the J.J. Watts and the Andre Johnsons and, Kubiak and those type of big names and big personalities that we know had success, it's a big deal. It's a big deal.
And, to that point, you kind of refreshed my memory on something. During the conversation with Gary Kubiak this morning on Sports Radio 610 he made mention of this kind of unprompted, like, as much advice as he'd like to give DeMeco right now, he's trying to kind of stay away and give him his space and time and, doesn't want to bother him too much because he's got a lot going on, obviously. But Gary made mention, you know what? DeMeco's probably being tugged a lot right now. And I think what he probably meant by that is maybe by some former players, guys that he used to play with, whether it be Houston, Philadelphia, guys that are interested, guys that have advice. When you take a new job, certainly in this type of role as a head coach or even maybe an offensive coordinator, everybody wants to give you their 2 cents. Everybody wants to tell you what you should and shouldn't do. Gary had some very good advice for DeMeco, and it was some advice that he was given by somebody unnamed. He didn't mention who, but when he was first hired by Bob McNair years ago as the Texans head coach. And it was, it'll get done. Somebody just told Gary that it'll get done. And Gary was like, what the hell does that mean? It'll get done. And it wasn't until later, into his first season as head coach and maybe towards the end of it that he realized, I get it. Once you step back, settle in, understand the situation, and you are deliberate and patient in your hires that you're making as coordinators or assistant coaches, once you trust the people that you need to develop and establish your culture in a locker room and on the field, once you trust those guys, everything that was swimming in your mind that you were worried about in your early days upon taking the job, they just get done. They calm down because you allow people to do their jobs. And one of the biggest pieces of advice that I think, any guy that's kind of been there, done that can impart any sort of wisdom on a young head coach could give is be patient, talk to people, talk to everybody. Make sure you hire the right guys that have the same vision that you had when you took the job. And I thought that was probably the best advice that I heard Gary Kubiak offer up for DeMeco Ryans this morning.
Good stuff. And before we go, we're going to remind you that we'll do the show on Thursday. And that show, we're hoping there might be some news as far as Texans coordinators potentially being hired. But if not, there's a little football game that's going on this Sunday. I don't know if anybody heard about it. It's the last football game of the NFL season. We'll talk about that and some other things. And also, Shaun, tomorrow, look for a show that we're going to have up with our Houston Cougar experts over with the Scott Holman podcast. One, if not both of those guys, are going to join me and talk about what's going on with the Cougar basketball team. I've definitely got some thoughts after watching this team for a couple of weeks of where they are in the big picture. Maybe Shaun wants to pop in on us, but if he doesn't, it's just going to be me and Scott Holman and the guys with the Scott Holman podcast. But it's going to be a quickie, just getting them for a little bit because they're jammed with stuff right now. A lot going on for them, but we're going to get a good 20 minutes in with them talking about what's going on with the Cougars basketball team. And if you missed it, we're also going to talk a little bit about the Big 12 schedule that just came out with Houston Cougars playing some Big 12 teams. Remember, that's happening just a few months from now. Can you believe it, Shaun?
Surreal, man. The schedule looks fantastic. I mean, maybe don't get used to it, but enjoy the next couple of years of having the likes of Oklahoma and University of Texas on your schedule. I mean, with UT coming into town, the atmosphere, that was my first go-to is like the atmosphere at TDECU this upcoming season, not just with UT, but just a Big 12 schedule coming in. I mean, it should be absolutely electric.
You might want to get season tickets, just a heads up, because the University of Texas is not going to come in maybe more than one time in the next, I don't know, forever. So if you want to see Texas at TDECU, and we're going to talk about it with the guys tomorrow, I'm sure this is going to come up again tomorrow, but you might want to get a little season ticket because if not, it ain't going to be cheap to get those tickets, I have a feeling.
No, and maybe the best season ticket value in town is your Houston Cougar basketball team, but a close second just because of the absolute fantastic atmosphere and just the excitement, moving into a legitimate, bigger, better Power 5 conference next year. Houston football's not far behind.
Man, looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to talk actual Big 12 teams coming into the city of Houston. I think it changes maybe your whole perception as far as an interest in college football for a lot of people in the Houston area. I hope so. And I hope it changes the perception of the Houston Cougar program for people that maybe aren't fans. You're stuck on your own team where you were at. I watch every single Houston Cougar basketball game, and I watch every single Missouri Tiger basketball game. And I have an allegiance to both of them, and it's great. And I would like to see other people get involved. And I have no degree. I have no diploma. I have no hours paid over on Scott and Holman. I know you do, Shaun, but I don't. And I still love my Cougars.
You gotta love them, man. Here, the most interesting thing for me is going to be able to watch this basketball program. Look what they've become, in the 8-9 years that Kelvin Sampson has taken the helm over there. Routinely a tournament team to be reckoned with here in the last 3-4 seasons. And you had a number one team ranked team in the country a couple of times. And they certainly seem to be, on track to maybe be a number one, for a third time this season. What's that going to look like when they're routinely facing other top teams within the Big 12 every single night next season and the year beyond? That's going to be an interesting follow. I'm going to enjoy this season while we can because I think they're legitimate. But like I told you, it always kind of bothers me when you're the favorite to win it all. That's a big time target on your back. If anybody's well equipped to handle that, it's a Kelvin Sampson coached basketball team, though. More
Cougars tomorrow. Check us out. We're going to be coming at you again. And until we talk to you again, have a great one. Thanks again, Shaun.
Thanks, man. Enjoyed it.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Hey, don't forget to support us by subscribing and commenting on YouTube. You can always listen to us on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends about us and share our show links on social media. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.